We're talking tales from the Valley of Despair,
Parables of informed pessimism,
anecdotes of the greatness trap,
and the stories you tell yourself.
all this and a good deal more after the break. Welcome back, all you beautiful people. Today we're talking tales from the Valley of Despair. As always, I'm Nick. That's Eric. We're the Get Good Guys.
And this is the Get Good Guide. And we're rolling.
I feel like we should keep that in. And we're going.
That way people know to begin listening, right? You
Start
gotta
listening
Turn
now.
on your ears, people. It's Tales from the Valley of Despair.
Sounds like a murder mystery.
Yeah, that's not bad. Maybe we'll write a little short story, a little novella.
Oh, yeah. Add it to our plethora of other business ideas that take away from this business idea.
Yeah, we'll run an all-night oil change, subscription-based oil change place that also provides sort of a reading room for people.
You're going to need something to read while you're getting your oil changed. I mean, it's already going to be evening. Might as well get a little scared.
It's a little thing called synergy. We are talking about the Valley of Despair very specifically all day today here on the main feed and the Patreon.
We talk about this as being past good, essentially. Once you've reached that top 20%, in order to really gain much more, it takes a lot more effort, a lot more time, a lot more input, and that can be rather frustrating. Frustrating, especially because you felt like you've grown so quickly, and then it's hard to see all that growth because all you can see is that long slog ahead of you.
Yeah, and that's another synonym for the Valley of Despair is informed pessimism. This idea that once you're good at something, in that top 20%, you kind of understand more intimately just how hard it is to be great. And the greatness preachers will say like, oh, now it gets real. Like now the rubber meets the road, and Dave Goggins will tell you to go run 50 miles a day or whatever. But
good news, you can break both your shins and still run.
And so you can still run. Isn't that awesome?
Why not? I'm a big fan.
And we sort of coined the term the greatness trap. I'm sure someone said the words in that order before us, but
I don't believe it.
But this idea that, what about when you're there already? Like, what does that look like? What does it feel like? And we have some examples from our own lives. We have some examples that we've seen other people kind of grapple with.
Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting to go through some of those today, especially maybe some examples since before you and I started this podcast and started this book, because I think both of us have really fallen into that quite often. And the impetus for this book in general at the beginning, right, was feeling like this should be more enjoyable. What I'm doing, I shouldn't feel like it's work to go play a game that I want to play.
Right. Yeah, and it was kind of a twofold deal, right? We sort of said, hey, we've discovered this truth that you can put in 20% of the right inputs and get 80% of the outputs, but at the same time, I think simultaneous, we were both experiencing this greatness trap. This and even there were things where we were already on the second summit. We were already in the top 1% of doing that thing and felt pretty empty. And that's maybe a different story, because now we're not talking about being on that second summit. We're talking about being in that Valley of Despair.
It is worth just noting very quickly, because seems like that's where once you make it there, everything is good, but that's not always the case. So
the despair comes with you.
Yeah, it doesn't leave you. It stays. It stays there.
Well, so I'm going to jump into my first example, which is a video game that I play. It's a relatively new-ish game, but it's an esport, right? It's a competitive video game called Teamfight Tactics, and it is of a genre called auto battlers or chess auto battlers. But essentially, it is a strategy game with a fair amount of complexity, but not an actions per minute economy. In other words, it doesn't matter how fast you can play. Right. So it's good for old people, right? And there's a few million active players for TFT specifically. It's in the League of Legends, realm. And they have seasons, about 2 seasons a year. And I think for pretty much every season, I've finished in the top 1%. Yeah. But there is this very distinct, marked, truth that the instant I'm in the top 20%, it stops being fun.
Yeah.
And it stops being something I enjoy, and it just becomes a slog. And for whatever reason, psychologically, I have been unable to escape this greatness trap, and I just find myself in the slog season after season.
We've talked a little bit off air about how you're able to, like, each season, start again, right? Start again and kind of give it a break and then start fresh.
Yep.
Do you feel like each time you start anew that you're enjoying it until that 20%, or already from the beginning you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not enjoying
No, I am having a great time.
Oh, you are? Even now?
Yeah.
Even now?
Even I think this is like season 11 for me.
So even though you've kind of been deep in that greatness trap,
because I get to restart, and everyone gets their ranks reset, and it's new. The game itself is novel; it changes, and so new rules and new pieces and that sort of thing, and it's a blast because I'm good enough that playing into the top 20%, I can kind of like have a great time. I can do different stuff, cool, different strategies, novel. But once you get down to trying to go from good to great, you have to obey like statistical reality. There's only, they're called comps or compositions. There's only like 2 or 3 comps that will win consistently. And everyone else who's that good already knows this too.
Yeah.
So it just becomes this one sort of focused battle. And it's pretty depressing because you lose something. You go from having a cool thing that you enjoy doing to not having that. And that's a bummer, man. It's gated. It's a one-way valve.
Right.
So once I push past that 20%, I can't
go
go back to it and be like, oh, I'm just going to have fun.
Well, in any of these realms where you're against another person, right, competitively, you're also, the people you're playing against kind of vary in that same space. So you get more variety in what you see on the other side of the table or other side of the computer, which is also more fun and interesting.
Yes.
I have this same problem. I won't talk about it in depth, but I have the same problem with chess. I recently, past year or so, started getting into it a little bit because I always thought it was fun. But what bugs me about it is that it's like already solved. Right. It's like solved. There's an answer, and that bugs me because I don't want there to be the answer.
Right.
I want to be able to think about it and come up with it, but you should just do the correct thing. Like, just memorize, do the correct move. Don't make something up. And that bugs me about that.
Yeah.
I'll go with an example from my athletic life. Throughout high school and college, I ran track, did primarily long jump and high jump, with high jump being kind of my forte, as it were. Run and jump over a bar, not pole vault, where you run and pole vault over a bar.
Yeah.
Just run,
less
just
terrifying.
Run and jump. Yeah, maybe less fun too. But so anyway, I started this I did it like a little bit in 8th grade. I just ran and jumped and it was fine, whatever. And then throughout high school, my junior year, I kind of needed something to do because I had stopped playing baseball and was like, I want to do something. And I started run track. So I started high jumping then in my junior year of high school, really. And within like that season, I reached pretty much the highest I ever jumped. And then I went to college and did the same thing. I also did high jump for my university, but never reached higher than that. Like 6 feet 4 inches is what I jumped. But that very first season, like, I was already utilizing all my things. There's only so much technique that can be involved without really getting into it. And there being a very specific number, like inch to the inch number, makes it really difficult to be like, oh, well, now I've done this to the exact same height, not 1 inch more, for 4 years now. And in order to get anywhere past that, I have to put in so much work, which I didn't put in the work, that my senior year of college, I didn't even run. I didn't even run track. I didn't do any jumping at all. Because I felt so demoralized about how long I had been working on it, or thought I had been working on it at least.
Right.
Because I felt like, I'll just keep putting in some effort and I'll be getting better. And maybe I was, but not enough to go up 1 inch. And that's, terribly an upsetting feeling to feel like, I've made no progress.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that's the tricky part about being in the valley of despair. Yeah. You simultaneously don't have a good time, and if you're not incredibly diligent, you also don't make progress. Yeah. So you just sort of stand there clinging to the side of this cliff face, getting tired while not making any progress.
Yeah, and then by the end, I was like jumping worse because I I was, well, I don't know what's happening. I don't know why this is not getting better. I know now why it was not getting better, because I was not working at it in the correct way.
Yeah.
But that's the whole problem, right? When you're working for merely good, even if you're not putting in the exact correct amount of effort or practice or whatever, you're still going to gain and grow. And that like leeway is really, really enjoyable, to not feel so pigeonholed into one thing.
Yeah, to be sure. Well, we talked about kind of a recreational example, kind of an athletic example. We had another example for the main feed, and then we have a few for the Patreon as well. Some in the artistic realm, some in this one is kind of in the business or professional realm, which is how often I find myself having or forcing myself to really carefully craft my writing. And sometimes it's very good, right? That's a good thing to do, right?
Yeah, of course.
And I'm, I have a master's degree in English, and so
Bit of
probably
a wordsmith.
I should be something of a wordsmith, right? If push comes to shove, but there is a labor. You have to labor at that, and there are times when that's simply not the right answer, right? So oftentimes, being in the valley of despair, we talked about it being kind of like a tough emotional thing. We talked about it being kind of like a ruiner of good times. But it can also be a time suck, right? It can be a huge net negative, because that's time and effort and bandwidth that you're not spending somewhere else more productively.
Well, and it's tricky. Now, one of the examples we're going to run out of time. I'll talk about more on Patreon. One of the things about this example is, because you have such a big background in it, you feel like you should be doing a good job.
Right.
But you feel like I need to, everybody knows I have a master's in this.
Right.
Everybody knows that I do this for a living, basically. Right. There's a lot more pressure on what you're going to output.
Right.
As opposed to, oh, well, I don't know. This is not my job.
Right.
This is not something I do on a regular basis. Whatever I turn out will be great, because no one's expecting anything, and you're not expecting anything.
So you've got kind of the three horsemen, as it were, of the Valley of Despair.
Shoot, why didn't we put that in the title?
Should have been in the crash.
Well.
But yeah, so you got obviously loss of time and bandwidth, which is huge. You've got loss of sort of positive emotions associated
enjoyment,
with
whatever it is.
Right, increase in frustration, and so that's like, man, that's a tough one to just hang out with those effects constantly. Well, we've got a few other examples, but I'm looking at the clock. Hey-o. And I think it is time for us to say our goodbyes and head for the Patreon. So we will see all of you in the outro. Well, gee, thanks, everybody. Sure do appreciate you taking the time. Here in the Get Good Grotto on this beautiful late May day, we were talking tales from the Valley of Despair. We have a number of other tales to tell, and we'll be doing that over at the Patreon. So we invite you to join us, patreon.com/getgoodguide. You can also head over to the center of the Get Good Galaxy, getgood.guide. We'd love to have you join the membership area, or heck, even just get yourself a copy of the guide and get going. As always, I'm Eric. That's Nick. We're the Get Good Guys.
And this is the Get Good Guide.
You look a lot like that actor. And he was like, yeah. And then he just looked at it for a while. He's like, are you that actor?
Are you?
He's like, I don't know.
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure who you're talking about.